Reddit reports. Like, subscribe and hit the bell. When Hermione talked about Amortentia, the love potion, she said that it smells different to each person, according to what attracts them. Hers smelled like freshly mown grass, new parchment and spearmint toothpaste. What do you think yours would smell like? Bothies. Basically they're small cottages in remote parts of the Scottish Highlands that are left unlocked, free to be used for shelter by people travelling the mountains. They're not well furnished or anything, but they act as a freely usable weatherproof shelter for anyone to use in a country where summer usually just means the rain is slightly less frigid. It used to be that they weren't too well known, the hill walking community used them, maintained them, and everyone observed an unwritten code of conduct where you'd make sure to leave it tidy, clean and ready for the next person to use. However, they suddenly experienced an upsurge in awareness, and a lot of them suffered for it. People would go to them so they could have a piss up in a scenic location and leave them covered in rubbish and shit. Literal shit. They're normally refurbished from long abandoned houses and frequently don't have toilets, so they're equipped with a shovel to bury your waste. People seemed to think they were free holiday homes that they could just take over. Some people just vandalized them for the fun of it. As a result, they suffered quite a bit. They should offer shelter from bad weather and a safe place to sleep. But now you have a bunch of entitled, lazy assholes who go and wreck them.
That's so sad. We have cabins like that up here in Alaska and the Yukon, but fortunately there are so few people that they are in good shape.
Watch your words, or else it will happen to you.
The masses aren't attracted to the backcountry of Alaska due to the dangers it presents. What Op described is exactly how a few cabins are like in my state as well. The huts closer to civilization are more damaged than the ones where you have to hike 10 miles in. Even with such a distance, I still find trash/damage left by hikers/backpackers as well.
Greater than TBF, the masses aren't attracted to the backcountry of Alaska due to the dangers it presents. So what you're saying is that we should fill the cottages with bears, moose, and Alaskans.
Aye. What an absolute disgrace. Bothies were a tradition stretching back thousands of years. There are some that still aren't well known. It's a few major sites I find are the worst ones.
eBay. I remember being able to get an absolute bargain for almost anything I wanted. Now, every shop puts their shit on eBay.
The other problem with eBay is it completely messed up people's perceptions of what stuff is worth. Someone will see some shitty thing on eBay listed for like $500 and be like, oh, that's what it's worth. But it's been listed for $500 for 2 years and nobody bought it cause that's crazy. Then someone at a flea market or Craigslist is like, oh, it's on eBay for $500 so I'll give you a deal, $450. If that happens, though, you can show them completed listings, where nothing comes close to that price.
In the same vein, Amazon. You absolutely cannot trust 95% of the sellers on there because it's almost always some knockoff cheap-ass Chinese shit from sellers with names in all caps.
To some extent, amusement/theme parks. They have to be popular to justify building new, state-of-the-art attractions, but eventually get so crowded that you need to buy special passes and get on a ride in less than 2 hours and can barely even find a place to sit when you want to rest for a minute. I live near Six Flags Great America, outside of Chicago. Anytime I've gone in the last 10 years it's been a ridiculous mass of humanity. More rides than ever, but every decent ride is like a 2-hour wait.
As a resident of Orlando, this crowded issue is more than just in the parks. Universal has plans to make this Nintendo theme park or resort that is massive, and the neighborhood right across has justified issue with it concerning the amount of traffic that will come. This city is a tourist trap and our infrastructure is barely hanging on with the growth and visitors.
I live in Egypt and many of the most popular places are ruined by all the people there all year round.
Yay, having a KFC right across from the Sphinx is a total WTF.
Holy shit, are you serious?
He did an episode of No Reservations once in Rome and didn't show any of the restaurants from the outside. If no one knows where the restaurants are, they won't be overcrowded with tourists and become inaccessible to the locals. Really respectable of him.
That was Parts Unknown. The episode that the person you're replying to was talking about was No Reservations, the black and white Rome episode. I can no longer eat my favorite burger easily because of Guy Fieri. Edit. I feel I need to point out that I said I can't easily eat there. There is just a long ass line now. The food is still good. It's not ruined. Yep. Ate at a place that was on diners, drive-ins, and dives, and my sandwich had part of plastic bag in it. I don't eat at restaurants featured on that show anymore.
Man vs. Food ruined my favorite grilled cheese. They turned into a chain and threw away the quality they used to have.
Is this melt and CLE? Because I feel you on that one. I refuse to eat at any of the chains, and you'd really have to sell me hard to go to the original.
Yup. I live right down the street from the original, and it's not really ever worth the effort.
Fucking knew it. What are the wait times like nowadays? I haven't lived in Cleveland for 6 years, but I remember shortly after that episode aired the place went from getting a table in 20 minutes at most during peak hours to a 4-hour wait. It was ridiculous. This was at the original location on Detroit Ave.
You can walk into the one in Mentor and have no wait, even at dinner time on the weekends. Used to be packed all hours of the day when they first put it in.
I went there too. But I noticed it was much more expensive than other ceviche places that were just as good in Cartagena.
A bar near me was on bar rescue. They are inexplicably proud of this fact. I don't think it really increased business for them at all. Have you ever noticed there's a threshold where a song gets too popular and will live on with the memory of everyone thinking it was overplayed and annoying?
This is why I hate Radioactive. 4 months straight, hearing it every morning and afternoon on the school bus did it for me.
I'm waking up to ASH in dust. I wipe my ass and I slap my nuts.
I'm breathing in my testicles.
Oh whoa.
Despacito. The summer it was popular, I remember turning on the radio and switching through stations, and it was always on at least one. Still to this day can't listen to I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith. Fucking Armageddon.
Oh God, remember that also, and I Will Always Love You. You. Whitney Houston. Finally, Celine Dion's Titanic song.
Happy by Pharrell Williams. That grew old real quick, but will everyone keep playing it? You bet.
I just hated that song. The chorus is way too long. It just sounds like a loop on replay. Paralyzer by Finger 11 was the poster child for this in the early 2000s. It was on at least once per hour on every rock station. Got to the point where I never wanted to hear it again. Ever.
Some artists purposefully pull their songs from the radio for exactly this reason. CeeLo Green did it with Crazy.
Last year I did the Utah National and State Parks during the early spring off-season, and the measures they are taking to try to accommodate the massive number of visitors during the summer is incredible. Parking, lodging, sanitation, and safety are all becoming problems, and I hope that these places don't become victims of their own popularity. Arches really seems to attract people doing stupid, dangerous shit. The iconic delicate arch is like a magnet for morons who don't prepare for the trail, take risky selfies, vandalize and climb on things, and drink in places where there's 360 degrees of cliffs around you.
They plead guilt to criminal mischief, which in Utah can carry $300 up to $5,000 fines and jail time. They also lost their positions as Boy Scout leaders.
They were Boy Scout leaders. WTF? I am an Eagle Scout. One of the principles we learned in Scouts was to leave no trace. Was this troop just looking at that principle as optional? What the literal fuck?
Scouts are people and some people are assholes. Don't let that discourage you though, there are plenty of Scouts who do live by the principles.
Huh, that's interesting. Cool. A great read. And, proof that popularity ruins everything. Everything. Get up to the top, you interesting bastard.
Most of the historic monuments. The amount of markings all over them makes me sick.
There is graffiti left by Roman soldiers and Napoleonic soldiers in Egypt, which was pretty neat to see tbh.
Given enough time, graffiti becomes a part of the historical landmark itself. It's a catch-22 caused by an attachment to our own time. We see the landmark as something that needs to be preserved by, for, us, but the reality is we're in just as inconsequential a time of history as any. One of two most famous sites in the Hagia Sophia is where a Viking scratched his name in the marble. The scratch is protected and now treated as sacred, but it's functionally no different than you or I going to a structure built 200 to 400 years ago and doing the same. Don't get me wrong. I don't like it when people deface historical landmarks, but our outrage is fleeting, and sometimes contributes to the perceived value of the relic.
The function of graffiti isn't what's remarkable, it's the rarity. Those names written on the wall are probably the only surviving relics of their kind, representing historical forces clashing. It's the difference between a bullet hole from World War II and a bullet hole in my shed. It won't become more significant with time, because the world is full of our trash, enough that 99% of what we make and do won't be interesting to future generations, no matter how much time passes.
Interestingly enough, there is a huge amount of trash in the world because of World War II. At the end of the war, my grandfather turned over his service weapon and they bulldozed it and tons of other equipment into the ocean in the Philippines because it was cheaper than to bring it all back. What constitutes trash is just as much a factor of when and why the trash was created. If someone found that old equipment nowadays, it would be of great interest to researchers and collectors. But it was still trash at one time. Furthermore, given enough time, the bullet hole in your shed would be of interest to researchers as well. Greater than given enough time, the bullet hole in your shed would be of interest to researchers as well. I can imagine the clickbait "Why" headline in the future: archaeologists unearth evidence of a possible hillbilly feud.
Beaches. Once tourism starts, it usually has devastating effects on the flora and fauna. They had to close a beach off from the public in Thailand to give nature time to recover. Edit for grammar. Edit to give more information. I was talking about Maya Bay, which was made famous by the movie The Beach. Yes, the one with Leo. Despite its isolation, the bay attracts so many tourists there isn't even any room to lay down on the sand. The bay is closed off until officials believe the coral has rejuvenated sufficiently.
They had a similar problem with the poppy reservation a year or so ago. There was a super bloom that resulted in fields of beautiful orange flowers. People kept visiting and taking pictures in the poppies. The problem was that these flowers were rather delicate. If you stepped on a patch too many times, there was a good chance the plants in that patch would die. They had designated paths all along reservation and signs telling people to stay on the path, but they kept ignoring them. There were a ton of dead patches in the poppy fields. There were also a ton of Instagram photos of people laying in patches of poppies.
Greater than it's very frustrating to witness how some people just really do not care at all how they leave the place, as long as they were able to take advantage of the beauty themselves. You just summed up humanity very nicely with that one sentence.
I vaguely recall reading about an idiot landing a helicopter in the middle of that bloom. It was in California, right? Yep, they ended up prohibiting visitors for the rest of the season.
That only makes it more enticing and rewards the people who got theirs. Screw you. This is why I completely support it when places just start restricting the amount of people that can get in on a daily/monthly basis. When a place becomes too popular, it's simply unsustainable and makes it a certainty that it won't last. On another note about beaches, maybe you have found one that has a small community and is nice and quiet. After a few years things pick up and they get a restaurant, then a hotel, then more restaurants and bigger hotels. After 20 years it's no longer what you remember and is overpopulated. The Outer Banks in North Carolina is like this. I'm old enough to remember it being a small set of towns that was primarily for people to come and fish. Now it's covered in shitty tourist shops and has no charm. Best time to go now is the off-season and deal with winter. Fishing hasn't been the best either. Same with Boracay in the Philippines.
I never knew how big of a problem tourism was until I saw the Barcelona tourism documentary. It's like, way beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Just a fucking sea of tourists packed in the streets. Entire portions of the city are completely insufferable.
The tourism to Mount Everest has become the primary income for a lot of people in that area, so it's not surprising the guides and Sherpas continue to take people up in large numbers, but it does seem sometimes like the numbers are unsustainable and downright dangerous. I've never been there and never will go, but it fascinates me, so I read about it all the time. So much litter at or near the summit and all along the way up. The Sherpas do try to clean what they can, but up in the death zone, every ounce of what you are carrying matters tremendously, so very little can be done to get rid of all the oxygen canisters and things left laying around.
The fine is almost pointless. If the expedition costs $18,000 for Sherpa and climbing permit, gear and other arrangements costs $9,000, littering fine costs $5,000, then the total is $32,000 to climb Mount Everest. The people who pay the kind of money don't care if it's $32,000 or $27,000. While they might try to pick up their trash at camp and get it to the big trash pile, if it comes down to life or death at the top, they aren't going to hesitate about $5,000 to leave a couple oxygen canisters and bags of poo behind.
Greater than the fine is almost pointless. Almost pointless. It's essentially a climbing tax, but one that's only paid by underprepared or overcommitted parties. If you're properly prepared for the expedition, then there should be no need to leave gear and refuse on the mountain, so you won't be assessed a fine. You're right though, the guide services on Everest are essentially going to bake this into the cost of their offerings for their tourists as a cost of doing business. But at least it's the responsible parties, the tourists, paying the costs, not the capable mountaineers.
Yeah, I completely agree. There are certainly a lot of people that shouldn't be anywhere that mountain, but they have enough money that they don't get refused. That's where the problem lies.